This was actually my first NSSA, and so when I am in a space like this with so much rich insight, it's so important, I think, to take what we've learned and go from reflection to synthesis to action. And so that's what we're going to prime this group to do with these incredible panelists modeling that behavior for all of us today. And so I will introduce each of our panelists and then ask for one takeaway and then introduce the next panelist. And then we'll go through a number of reflection questions to drive us towards action. And I'll just go down the line. So first we have Matt Barrow, who is the Director of Services at Pearl, where you partner with school systems to design and scale high-impact tutoring, and you draw on 14 years of experience at Baltimore City Public Schools. And looking at your background, you moved across roles as a teacher, driving MTSS as a coordinator of academic tutoring, and as a director of differentiated learning. And you believe that implementation is the intervention. And so I am curious with that lens, what is one takeaway you have coming out of today's conference?
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone on the NSSA team for putting this together. It's been another incredible event, so thank you for having everybody for putting this together. Let's give them a round of applause. A lot goes into this. So for me, I think the main takeaway I have from today is really rooted in what you just said. It's one of my kind of core takeaways from the experience I had in a district at all those different levels. And we have a lot of inputs in education, right? A lot of things that go into districts. So whether that is coaching, whether that is curriculum, whether that is high-impact tutoring, we have a ton of different inputs that push into districts. That's not the same thing as impact. What drives impact is how well things are actually implemented. And that's a lot of times the missing link that exists between the promise of the things we try to put out there and what actually happens in schools. And so I heard a number of different things throughout the day that kind of got at this idea. And I'm just going to sum it up by saying implementation managed by a district, that's where the responsibility lies. And so being able to say clearly that you know what's happening across schools because you have a way to have visibility on that is critical to managing implementation. You cannot manage what you cannot see. And I think a lot of the lessons we've learned about high-impact tutoring over the last 5-6 years now, it really does come down to dosage, and that gets driven by managing implementation effectively. And if you can see it, you can drive your support where it needs to go, and then it's going to have better outcomes. It's going to lead to that impact from that input. And I think there's a lot of lessons we can apply from that to other areas of education as well. I think about MTSS in general and the need to integrate it in there a lot more effectively, and it comes down to that visibility question for me a lot, I think. I'm just going to wrap that up, but just by saying, at the district level, if we can manage implementation because we can see it, regardless of what the model, the vendor, the partnership, the program is, if we can see implementation, we can manage it more effectively based on the limited human capacity that we have.
Thanks, Matt. Next, we have Dr. Nakia Towns, who is the president of Accelerate, where she funds and supports innovation research and influences policy around high-impact tutoring. Previously, you served as Deputy Superintendent at Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia and at Hamilton County Schools in Tennessee, which was the fastest improving district in the state, and then had state leadership roles at the Tennessee DOE. Same question for you. What is one takeaway you have coming out of today's conference?
So one takeaway, I think, from when we started this morning to where we've ended this afternoon is around the notion of coherence. And I'm really thinking about it in terms of coherence of the student experience, right? We just heard from a student who benefited from tutoring. And when I think about all the pieces and the parts, we have people in the room who are district leaders, state leaders. We have program providers, vendors, partners. We have researchers. And when we think about coherence of the student experience, we need to think about that both in school and out of school, right, time. And so it makes me think about, as great and wonderful as this group is, as we've had conversations throughout the day, I think about who isn't in the room in terms of that coherence of the student experience. And that's how we're really going to be able to drive that learning impact when we make sure that families and communities understand the goals that we have for students, that we make sure that publishers of those core Tier 1 curriculum materials understand understand the benefits of high impact, high dosage tutoring, and the framing of it as really a personalized learning or personalized intervention model that can be applied in any number of circumstances and situations. And then thinking about, of course, the feedback loops to educators in terms of understanding the classroom teacher, the tier 1 teacher, understanding what's happening in terms of high impact tutoring. One thing that really I started to think about is that high impact tutoring, high dosage tutoring, we need to really lean into the mainstreaming of our work. We are not a special flower. We are the intervention that frankly should be displacing a lot of interventions that aren't working for kids. And we need to say that with our chest more. And so that means that we have to bring more people into the conversation that we're having in these rooms to understand that high impact tutoring is the intervention. It is the personalized learning model and framework that we should be using to support kids, particularly kids who are furthest from opportunity and those who have the greatest learning gaps. So coherence of the student experience, that is my takeaway.
You can clap for that. Coherence, and say it with your chest. And then we have Dr. Janice Page, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Academics at eStem Public Charter Schools, where she leads academic progress and instructional initiatives. Dr. Page believes that students will rise to any challenge when educators build meaningful connections and provide clear pathways for success, which I just love that idea and that belief so deeply. What is one thing that you are taking away from today's conference?
This morning, Dr. Loeb started us off with 2 things. She said we need to raise the bar, and then we need to empower the people to clear the bar. So as we think about high-impact tutoring, I think about who are those people that we have to help clear the bar. And so we have, as a district leader, my directors. We have teachers, we have students, and we have the families. But oftentimes, we don't have a valuable resource at the table at the beginning, and that's our teachers, because they're in the classroom. So as we're thinking about high-impact tutoring, our MTSS process and how it's aligned and the coherence, we need to have our teacher voices at the table to ensure that they understand what we want them to do, what that's going to look like, because it takes place in the classroom. So I think I've heard the human capital. They are our human capital, that will make it work. So making sure that as we move forward, leveraging our connections and making sure that we have all the people at the forefront of the conversation so that we can clear the bar.
We're going to go now from takeaways to actions. And so for each of you, I'm curious, what is one action that you are taking away or committing to doing following from today's sessions?
Sure. So going back, when we started our high-impact tutoring, our directors or principals were very hesitant to have AI support. So one of the things that I will take back is what I've learned here, and to make sure that we're looking at the possibilities, leveraging the connections that I've made in the room today, and having those conversations with the directors that here's the virtual, the in-person, which is what we have now, to the AI, but what's the in-between that we have that are possibilities? So that will be the takeaway. That's what we're going to have in terms of conversations as I get back.
I think for me, one thing I heard repeatedly throughout the day was just this idea of adaptability. I was in a session earlier, and it was about how a partner adapted to the needs of the school. Rather than trying to force something that just was not going to work there, they'd figured out how to make it work based on where the people were. And so, thinking about, again, going back to all of the inputs out there, right? And just thinking about the diversity in geography and experience that people have in different states and different places. Whether you're in West Virginia and you are in a place that is very resistant to something like AI, or if you're at the forefront of that and you're doing all of the different things, right? For me now, like going from the district side to the now vendor side, one thing that I really take with that is how can I make sure I show up as a partner in the work that I do with districts How can I make sure that I'm not trying to force something based on my own knowledge or my own experience on something that may not work there necessarily? How can I adapt my own support based on where they are? And I think that's something we're all going to have to get really good at doing. Because at the end of the day, especially with the massive new levels of complexity as things are further and further from any type of centralization, the need to be adaptable is going to be critical to make things work. And things are only going to work if we figure out how to meet people where they are and support them in doing the things that they are trying to do for their kids.
Thank you. So the one action step that I'm going to take, and I think that I want to challenge everybody in the room to take, in the role that I have at Accelerate, we obviously think a lot about policy at the federal and the state level. And so where we started the morning when Dr. Lowe was talking about this being year 5 and where we were 5 years ago and what would happen post-ESSER. And so I'm thinking about scale and sustainability. And I think the charge that we have to be able to achieve scale and sustainability is that we have got to sneak high-impact tutoring into every nook and cranny and embed it into all the places that I think are low-hanging fruit in terms of embedding it. So I was having a great conversation with Katie Pace-Miles of the Reading Institute, and we were talking about clinical service hours for teacher prep students. So meaning those observation hours where normally they're just sitting at the back of the classroom taking notes, and we were, she was giving me her sneaky language for New York that's getting embedded around those hours should really be high-impact tutoring hours, and the power of having a pre-service teacher during that teacher training be able, there you are, Katie, be able to deliver tutoring. I think about the same thing in terms of funding. We just talked about tutoring is an intervention. It is a part of MTSS. Every place where you have a weighted student funding formula that says that you get more money for a student who's below grade level and there's a defined set of interventions, we need to sneak the language of high impact tutoring, high dosage tutoring to be defined as one of the approved interventions that unlocks those dollars. So in every instance and opportunity, when we're thinking about scale and sustainability, we ought to be figuring out where can we embed high-impact tutoring, high-dosage tutoring by name to be able to make sure that we have the dollars and we unlock the dollars because, again, tutoring is the intervention that we should be introducing every place that we can because it is the personalized learning strategy that's going to help move kids in their learning. So scale, sustainability, sneak it in everywhere.
And I will also commit to an action, and I'll try and thread these things together. So I heard seeing the opportunities more broadly. I heard from your prior answer that you can't measure what you can't see, and you can't imagine what you can't see, and to sneak tutoring in wherever you can. And as a funder, I think one of the most valuable things I've done in my 3 months in the role is to visit schools and see different models of tutoring in action. And it can help envision different ways to bring it into the different funding streams. It can help you understand the implementation challenges in a different way that inform better funding. As we think about different AI supports and different human supports, there was a great example in the last panel about misconception analysis happening really, really fast with AI. I think this is one of the few places where we'll hear the phrase misconception analysis is sexy. And at the same time, when the teacher tried to implement the misconception analysis live by clicking a button, real time, they hadn't thought through with their thinking time they would normally have what that meant for them or how to act on it. And so aligning the timing of AI and the timing of human thought is going to be an important part, I think, as we think about how to best integrate these types of models. As we look forward, I'm curious what each of you would envision to be the next chapter in high impact tutoring.
So I'm happy to start with this one. I think as we've been talking about the digital human connection and how do we continuously improve high impact tutoring, I think there is so much opportunity around what AI tools can do for us in terms of really being able to supercharge the work of tutors and educators and supporting students. And so in one of those, I was sitting in the session with Oakland and they were talking about MTSS, and one of the challenges was around still data aggregation, right? Like we have all of this information. I love to use the acronym DRIP. We're data rich and information poor, right? And what one model that we've seen in Accelerate is announcing next week our next round of grantees for our called for effective technology. And we have a grantee who is a public charter school, and they have developed their own AI model that essentially pulls all the student data that they have from all of these formative assessments that they've been giving, and it groups the students based on the learning challenge that they have right now, and then goes and uses the curriculum materials, all of this that they have online, and produces a tutor lesson. I almost like teared up. If you've been in a district, you know this is our central challenge. It's like we have so much information, but we don't have enough time. We have so much data, but we don't have enough time. Who's going to aggregate that? And to watch the computer machine, as I love to say, pull it all together and spit out the thing, and the tutor is ready to go with a lesson that is real time, what these students need right now, today, that is powerful. And that is a problem that needs to be solved. And so I have said that there are many, many cool things out there for AI, but like, is it solving a problem that we needed to solve? And that one hit the mark so hard that I was like, this is it. This is where we need to be able to leverage these new models, new AI models and tools to be able to design learning in a way that really meets the need of the moment and that makes the work more manageable and sustainable for the educators and others who support student learning. So that's where we're going. That's what I'm looking forward to in terms of what AI tools, ed tech tools can do to help us continuously improve and supercharge high impact tutoring.
I agree, and also looking at your teacher capacity, because we have concerns, but those concerns are being addressed. So to determine where you are as a school district, what are your needs that you, in order to continue with the high impact tutoring and using AI? What steps do you need to take to incorporate that? And especially when we're looking and considering the financial landscape that we're in, as a school district leader, I have to look at how do I train my teachers? How do I ensure that we're getting programs in that we can sustain throughout?
I'm going to use an analogy to answer this one. It's a kind of a baseball analogy. If you've ever seen the movie Moneyball, it's about the 2002 Oakland A's who had to figure out how to do a lot more with a lot less. What a perfect analogy for education right now. And the whole part of the whole theme of that was they had to think differently about where to find value in the things that they were going to invest in to get the most out of it, to be competitive and to put the best team on the field, right? I can't think of a better analogy for what needs to happen in education just in general right now. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we've been able to learn from tutoring that can help us do that. But what I think the future holds, what I hope it holds, is this idea that, you know, in Moneyball, it was about finding players that aren't big names, aren't flashy, aren't the, you know, most handsome or beautiful or whatever, right? It was like starting to think differently. Can they get on base? Looking at that specific metric. We got to start thinking about how can we support the things that get on base in schools? How can we make sure that the things that we are getting in there with regard to the different models of just tutoring in and of itself, but of all the things, how can we make sure that the focus around research, around advocacy, around everything we put into this is going towards things where schools can get on base to do them? I hope that's what the future of tutoring holds. I hope that's what the future of education holds. And that's really what it comes back to for me every time. It's when implementation is visible, we can see it, when we can manage it, we can see which schools are getting on base and which ones are not with the things we're asking them to do. We can support them to do it better, and that's going to have better impact for kids. And so I think that's a missing link a lot in everything we've done over decades now. And so I hope the future of tutoring is very, very much heavily centered on how can we support schools with getting on base to make sure it's happening for their kids.
I have a bad habit of extending metaphors and analogy too far, but so we're taking high dosage tutoring and now we're going to high on-base percentage tutoring. No, I think we talk about more at-bats for students, we talk about more reps, and how do we sort of unbundle all the components that go into high-impact tutoring and think about the right combinations of things that work for today's climate. We've talked a lot about relationships today and human connection. We have a reception following this. And so I'm curious, what is one question that each of you want to ask somebody, you can name them or not, either at the reception or in the next week if you want to preserve your social energy coming out of today, but want to act on that relationship component going forward.
I want to know how many students got tutoring last week. Can you tell me that? How many students got it, and how do you know it's working? Those are the two most important questions to me.
Similarly, I want to know what are you doing to make tutoring the preferred intervention for your Tier 2 and Tier 3 students? How are you making sure that implementation happens and people understand the evidence to displace legacy interventions that aren't working?
Similar question, how do you ensure that your MTSS process is aligned to your high-impact tutoring, your dosage? How are you checking for coherence and alignment? And to go back, how do you know that it's working?
And I'm going to be very specific. Alexander, I want to ask you what you learned as an anthropology student with a focus on climate change and human solutions, because that sounds so cool, and I want to learn more about that, and so excited that you'll have that ripple effect on all the students that you all serve in your program. But with that, I want to thank our panelists.